How's everybody doing today? I certainly hope you're doing well. It's that time again for another edition of Story Time. Now, I like to let people know whether or not it's a true story or not. It is not a true story. It is a story in which I created. The name of the story is called Cellmates. That's spelled with an S. So let's go ahead and begin. There were these two friends, one of them being Tammy and the other one being Richard. Now, Richard and Tammy had been friends most of their life. They went through high school together, and they both entered college studying the same exact thing, and that was criminal science. This was in the state of Massachusetts. And I tell you what, both of them were doing really well, too. And when both of them weren't at school, they'd go out and they'd go to these diners and such, go to the park. They'd go on these long drives and such, and it's not like they were sweethearts, let's say. They were more friends, because everybody knows when things get a little funny, when you go a little bit too far in that direction, it's better just to be friends, right? Especially when you've known somebody that long for most of your life. And I tell you what, old Tammy, she was doing a little bit better than Richard was as far as the grades go. But Richard was doing well just all the same. So, a few years go by. They both graduate with high honors, great grades, and they go their separate ways. See, Tammy moved to California. She took her degree and she wanted to maybe work for a police department somewhere. And old Richard, well, he skipped out to North Carolina, where he took his degree, and he went to do about the same. But I tell you what, old Tammy and Richard, they kept in contact with each other via email or telephone or something of the nature. Maybe not as much as they used to, because of course they had their own lives, their own jobs. Well, a couple of years went by on both sides of these parties. Both Tammy and Richard were doing their things in their states and such. Well, Richard got an offer to work for the FBI. And he decided, you know what? He's going to try for it. So he took the test. As far as the written part of it, he passed, no problem. Of course, you got to have a physical. He went for the physical test, or that part of it, and he just barely made it. You got me? Those damn donuts, right? So he entered into the FBI as a agent and such, and he was studying, and for the most part he was working with the Secret Service as an attaché for the Secret Service, except in the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And sometimes he would dabble in the USCS, which is United States Clandestine Service, on certain cases dealing with international transportation, distribution, and the creation of counterfeit money. So, essentially, the Secret Service usually works on those sorts of things, which is true. The Secret Service is the people that deal with the counterfeiting of American U.S. dollars, right? However, the FBI gets involved when it goes into a broader investigation. So I tell you what, old Richard, he'd been working for the FBI for 4 or 5 years now. And he hadn't heard from his friend Tammy for about 2 years, and he was scratching his head, man, what is going on here? He kept calling her and emailing her, and he got to the point there for a second. He's like, you know what? This is just crazy. This is my longtime friend. Where's Tammy at these days? So, being with the FBI, you have access to databases like you just can't even believe. I tell you what, he decided to look into things a little bit further, and he got a hold of one of her family members, maybe her mom or dad or something, called them right up and said, hey, I'm looking for my good friend Tammy, and I'm Richard, and I just wanted to ask you a question, and I was kind of wondering if you could tell me what's going on with her. I hadn't heard from her for a couple of years, and hell, I called her, I've emailed her, and I can't seem to get a hold of her. Can you help me out? Well, the person on the other side of the phone said that, well, you know what? They can't really talk about it, but supposedly, in the state of California, she's on an assignment for the FBI. In other words, she has disappeared. He's like, wait a minute, what'd you say? And the person on the other side of the phone said, yeah, she's working for the FBI and she's on a special assignment. And that's all I can say. They hang up the phone. He's thinking, what? His longtime friend that went to California, she was going to work in law enforcement. He had no idea that she also was working for the FBI. So, of course, Richard decided he's going to pull up the databases and find out exactly what part of the FBI she's working for in the state of California and try to find out what assignment she's on. What the heck is going on? I mean, it's crazy, right? So he starts talking to this one, starts talking to that one, pulling up the databases, and he says that, yeah, she's been working for the FBI for about 2 years, and she's on a special assignment, but that special assignment is confidential. Not even he can get to it, right? You got to have, there's certain tiers of clearances. That's all there is to it, right? So, he goes about his way. He's just doing his own thing. And as he's investigating the information dealing specifically with the counterfeiting, the creation of, in other words, the manufacturing of United States dollars, and the distribution of, he came across some information that indicates that there's 6 other FBI agents involved in this big counterfeiting ring. He scratches it. He's just like, wait a minute. These are FBI agents. How in the heck is it that they're involved in this counterfeiting? He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do, boy. I say, well, he's in a real spot. Because who do you go to when your colleagues are involved in such craziness, right? So a couple of months go by, and he's trying to be very low-key. He's trying to figure out, well, there's a jurisdictional problem. Because some of the FBI agents are in fact in other states. So now he's got a bigger problem. It's not like the rogue FBI agents are condensed to one area. No, sir, no, ma'am. They're scattered throughout the United States. And some of them are veteran FBI, and others have only been with the force maybe a couple of years. He doesn't know what to do. I mean, who do you go to? And that sort of thing. So again, he's trying to contact his good friend Tammy. Nothing. She must be still on that special assignment, whatever the hell it could be. So it's time for him to take a vacation. Because after all, I tell you what, Richard's been really working long hours. Sometimes 7 days a week. Damn. So he decides he's going to skip out to California to a specific place, to one of his favorite places, and that would be Danville. You see, Danville, California is right next door to Walnut Creek. And Danville, California is so beautiful. It sure is. Absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a beautiful place to visit. Because he has some friends out there, see? So he decides that he's going to go to a restaurant. Him and his friends are going to go to a restaurant. They're going to have a little bit of lunch. And as he's sitting there, waiting for his food to be delivered, and his friends are chattering amongst themselves. He just happened to look in the direction of the bar, and who does he see? He sees Tammy. Oh boy, this is good times, isn't it? He doesn't even say excuse me to his friends. He immediately backs his chair up. Right? He gets up, he races over there, and he's looking at her, making sure that's her. It is Tammy. It sure is. She's by herself. She's not with anyone. Oh, man. So it's not like he's going to impede in the case that she's on her special assignment. She's by herself. So he races over there and he says, Tammy, how are you doing? And she's very receptive. She's like, oh, Richard, how have you been? And they start talking amongst themselves, and he goes, so I understand you're working for the FBI. So am I. And they get to chattering amongst themselves and talking about all of the things that they've been doing, and she tells them that she can't talk about her special assignment. And but she can, of course, tell them how she's doing, and if she found somebody, if she got married or any of that stuff. He can find out that through the databases. He's like, listen, I've been calling you, I've been emailing you. Why didn't you respond back? She goes, well, I can't. You know how it is when you're on special assignment. You can't have any sort of communications for security reasons. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, but there's got to be a way. I mean, you know, I miss talking to you, and, you know, it's just a fluke that we're sitting here at the same restaurant on the same day, at the same hour, in the same minute. He's like, oh, Tammy, I'm really glad to see you. It's been so long since I've seen you, and it's fantastic, and I'm glad you're doing well. And here we're both working at the same exact place. This is just fantastic. Wow. He goes, but I did want to tell you something. He goes, you know, I've been working on this counterfeiting thing for quite some time now. And there's 6 other FBI agents involved in this thing. Man, I just don't know who to go to. I mean, we are talking the FBI, and a lot of these different agents, they're in other states, so now you have a jurisdictional problem. He goes, man, I don't know what to do. You got any suggestions? Oh, Tammy looks at him like, what did you just say? Oh, yeah. She knows what the score is. She sure does. Because you see, that special assignment she's on, she's on that assignment, investigating the 6 other FBI agents involved in this counterfeiting ring. But she can't talk about it. But she's investigating them already, and she has been for 2 years. So, here it is. They're sitting there at this restaurant. They're reminiscing about old times. Plus, they're talking a little bit about the shop and such. Their investigation. She can't talk about hers. He's talking about the things that he's discovered. He's confused. He doesn't know where to go. I mean, who do you go to? It's a good question, right? But she's already on the scene. She's been on the scene for some time herself. So about 6 months go by, and of course, Richard is back at his office and such, still investigating this. And it was a Tuesday afternoon at about 4:15 p.m. He scoots out from work. He's headed home. He's driving down the road, and he turns on the radio there, and a news report comes up talking about how 6 FBI agents were involved in a counterfeiting ring, and they've all been scooped up. Oh, man. I tell you what, he's racing. He's racing to get his ass home so he can turn on the TV. He wants to see this with his own eyes. He wants to see who these people are. He knows who they were because he came across the information. Of course, Tammy's going to know who they are. So he races home and he turns on the TV there and he's flicking through all the channels trying to find out, if there's any information, if there's any breaking news. Nothing. A couple of more minutes roll by and he finds a channel where they're talking about it. They're having this interview. And who's up there on the mainstream media? Oh, Tammy herself. Wow. It's quite interesting, isn't it? So Richard decided he's going to put his information into the mix. He calls the director of the FBI. And he lays out all the information that he discovered himself. And for the most part, it wasn't new information because Tammy had already busted all these knuckleheads. Sure did. They scooped him right up, too. And all of the cash that was confiscated at the time was in excess of about $14 million in counterfeit money. And it was pretty slick how they were doing it, too. Very, very slick. Because you see, again, dealing with counterfeit money, this is a fact, by the way. If you go to 7-Eleven and you just happen to have a counterfeit $20 bill and you try to pass it to the clerk and they run it through some sort of machinery that tells them, hey, this is counterfeit, one or two things will happen. The first thing will happen is they will keep the 20 and they'll send you on your way. Or they'll keep the 20 and they'll call the police and you got to sit there and wait for the police to get there to explain why you have a counterfeit 20 in your possession. Does that make sense? Right. So what they were doing was all of these FBI agents that were getting the $20 bills or the $100 bills or all these other bills that were counterfeit, how the scam was working was they were collecting millions and millions of dollars, and then they would go to banks, specific banks, and then tell the banks that they themselves have been issuing bogus $20 bills, right? And through insurance companies and through the U.S. Treasury and all these different agencies, they were taking the counterfeit money and reimbursing the bank with the counterfeit money and then taking the real money and distributing it amongst themselves. So here the banks are giving out counterfeit money to their patrons and the FBI is rewarding themselves with the clean money. Right? Because after all, when you have the insurance companies involved, you have the U.S. Treasury, you have the FBI involved, the banks are going to trust the authorities. This is how the scam was working. So here the banks are giving out to their own customers counterfeit money. It was given to them by insurance companies, the FBI, U.S. Treasury. It is a big old mess. Monstrous mess. So there were so many people affected by this. Tens of thousands of people. Well, they finally busted them. So, with the information that Richard provided to the director of the FBI, along with the investigation that was done by Tammy, state of California, she had been on that case for some time then. Well, both of them received awards and such. Being fantastic agents, they got a big old attaboy, attagirl, right? Pats on the back, these little awards, the whole 9 yards. And it was just a coinky-dink that Richard came across the same information at the same exact time that Tammy was investigating it, like to pinpoint accuracy of every individual involved and how it all worked and all that stuff. So Richard decided he was going to move from his state over to California. Because, of course, he wanted to be near his longtime friend, Tammy. Right? That's what he did. So the director of the FBI, for the entire FBI, decided that they were going to pair up both Tammy and Richard for a special assignment. And the special assignment dealt with BOP, BOP stands for the Bureau of Prisons, and that truly is a government agency within the United States, dealing with all prisons of the United States and or its territories, like Guam, Puerto Rico, Marshall Islands, that sort of thing, right? So, what they were going to do is they were going to create brand new identities for both Tammy and Richard. Brand spanking new identities. Brand new backgrounds. Brand new dates of birth. Brand new everything. I mean brand new. Because normally these days, if somebody is, let's say, astute in computers, and if certain individuals know how everything works, both electronically and under physical measure, in other words, mailing, then one guy or one person, one gal, can manipulate the entire databases throughout the world in about 6 months. It can be done, even today. Right? But you see, with the FBI, you're talking about the national databases like the NCIC, which is the national criminal, those national criminal databases, right? They have to go in there and change everything so that way, when people working for BOP, Bureau of Prisons, or the prison themselves, or let's say a police station, or let's say, pick anybody, when they type in, they key in a name, the first, middle, last, then all this information comes up. But you see, the FBI set it up that Richard and Tammy would go undercover to go in the same exact prison in California. And they're both undercover for a very specific reason. And the reason is because a lot of these prisons throughout the United States, there are more people incarcerated in the United States than any other country in the world. That is a fact. Per capita. That is a fact. That's not conjecture. That is a fact. There's more people in jail in the United States than any other country. Per capita. Right? Now, the scam that was going on with the prison systems within the United States, because a lot of the prisons are privatized. In other words, they're private organizations now. There's also another clause within your Bill of Rights or your Constitution that says there will be no debtor's prison. That actually does exist. However, that very thing is being violated every single day. Because this one didn't pay a fine. Boom, you're going to jail. Because that one didn't pay their court costs, or what, you're going to jail. Because this person over here didn't pay a credit card, or you didn't pay this, you didn't pay that, they toss you in jail. Excuse me. There will be no debtor's prison. But because a lot of people are naive to this, they don't challenge that. Because a lot of the attorneys that are supposed to be fighting for these people, they don't mention this because those very attorneys are working for the exact system in which they're trying to protect you from? Nah. No. This is why if you go under pro se, you're in big trouble. Because that in itself, the court looks at you, if you're trying to pull a pro se action, they're going to look at you and say, you just disrespected the court, you're going to lose automatically. That's how, it's almost like casino law, for real. Again, that's not conjecture, that's a fact. So, this is the problem. These privatized prisons, they're being operated throughout the United States under the direction of BOP, which is Bureau of Prisons, which is an agency that oversees all of this, is looking the other way. But why? Because there's money being made. Big money. What is the national, and I'm talking about not, because every state is like different, for your minimum wage. What is the national minimum wage? Right? Isn't it going to be fantastic that you can have a product being made through a privatized prison somewhere So instead of paying your labor force the minimum wage that is dictated by law, either under a federal sense or a state sense, you don't have to do that anymore because those prisoners have lost all of their rights. Now you can pay that prisoner 25 cents an hour. See where this is going? So what happened was, old Tammy and Richard went into the prison system. They sure did. They got all brand new identities. First, middle, last name, brand new identities. Dates of birth have been changed. All their history has been changed. All their background's been changed. Everything's been changed. Every last detail. So if somebody keys in their name, all this information comes up on the surface. They're reading through it and they go through. You see how I mean? That's how it works. All right? So they both enter the prison system. And their crimes aren't major, it's not like, hard felonies or anything like that. It's all BS. It's to give the illusion that they're actual prisoners when they're not. They're undercover FBI agents. They sure are. And they're going to bust this big old scam going on with all these cellmates. That's spelled with an S, by the way. So after a couple of weeks, one of the prison guards comes up to Richard and says, "Hey, Richard," he's tapping on the side of his bars there with the keys. He says, "Hey, Richard, how would you like to go to work tomorrow? You can get out, get some fresh air. What do you say? You'll actually get paid. We'll have something on your commissary. What do you say?" Oh, Richard, he's ready to go. He goes, "Oh, man, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic." Right? They're going to clean up some things around the highway and all this stuff, maybe some garbage and such. Well, he goes out the first day. They're out there picking up garbage. There's a bunch of them out there, too. There's like 25. They got all these armed guards everywhere just monitoring everything because what you're not understanding yet, again, these prisons have contracts with the states, with the municipalities to pick up garbage. But instead of being paid 25 cents per hour for the labor, they're being paid like $15 an hour per man. These guys are making bank. You got me? But that's not the only thing they're doing. They're making all kinds of stuff. They got all these little shops and factories and manufacturing facilities and the same thing. It's crazy. And Richard's out there, he's picking up garbage. He looks across the freeway there, and they have the equivalent of the other prisoners, except they're all female. And they're picking up garbage on the other side of the freeway. Right? Yeah. So Richard does this for, about a week. He just happens to look over the freeway, and he sees Tammy on the other side of the freeway, picking up garbage as well. Of course, they don't acknowledge each other, high fives or waving or any of that crap. But they know. They know. This goes on for months and months and months. And I tell you what is the funniest thing. On June 14th, Richard is supposed to get out of prison. Used to be released. But I tell you what, he's been out there every single day. Oh, he's a hard worker too. He doesn't complain, and he's up and ready to go, and he doesn't refuse. He even works on Saturdays. He doesn't care. Richard wants that fresh air. He sure does. Because I tell you what, when you're pinned up in a little cell in that, you don't want to be pinned up in there. You want to get some fresh air, be able to listen to the birds, pick up some trash, listen to the cars. Right? And again, he's supposed to be released on June 14th. At 3 p.m. Oh, yeah. So early in the morning, that guard says, "Hey, Richard, are you ready to go to work?" He goes, No, I'm not going to work today. I'm being released." "Oh, you are? Oh, that sucks. You're such a good worker." So, At about 1 o'clock, one of the guards comes to his door and has a seat on the bunk and starts talking to him. Says, so you're going to be released today, huh? Are you? He goes, yeah, I am. He goes, no, you're not. You're staying right here because you're a great worker. He's like, what are you talking about? I leave today. He goes, dude, you're not leaving anywhere. We're going to make damn sure of it. And that guard takes his own, like little billy club, nightstick, or whatever you want to call it. That own guard takes that club and hits himself right in the eye and starts screaming and raising all kinds of hell. But why? Because he turns around and he blames Richard for doing it. And guess what they do? They put him in the hole. He is not released. He's got to go to court again for assaulting a prison guard. Now he's going to be in there for another year, even though he didn't even do it. And he really didn't do it. But why? Because he's a good worker. I'm Monograph, and if you can't speak freely, you're simply not free.